Alrighty, here we go. Let's jump right in. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Ryan Tran podcast. It's been a week, but wanted to hop on and do this. Some things on my mind that I thought would be worth sharing and just discussing for a little bit. Yeah, it's been a week though. Feeling tired, feeling a little bit fatigued, you could say. But I still wanted to get this done nonetheless. And I think how I've been feeling from this past week is part of the concepts that I want to discuss a little bit. So essentially, let's just jump right in. Also, let me just pause real quick, slow down a little bit and say, if you're listening, thank you. If you've listened to, 5 minutes, 10 minutes of any of the recording so far, I appreciate you. And if you've been someone that's reached out, super cool. Just wanted to take a moment to say that. But anywho, let's jump right in. So the first thing that I've been thinking about for quite some time that actually came up again just because of how I've been feeling throughout the week, and that is the concept of the Stockdale Paradox. And I first heard about this just going down the Stoicism rabbit hole, and it's actually quite related to the philosophy of Stoicism. But some context. So pretty much there was this fighter pilot during the Vietnam War named James Stockdale, and he was conducting a mission where plane got shot down, got captured, and eventually became a prisoner of war for about 7 years. And he was able to survive the experience and talk about it after. And so the Stockdale Paradox can be explained like this. So this is my understanding of it, as short and sweet as possible. It is that one can be ruthlessly realistic about the short-term possibilities, circumstances of the situation, but also have unwavering optimism about the long-term future, right? And so you take that in the context of being a prisoner of war. The way that he explained it, the way that it's understood is that, a couple of things. One, it's a pretty bleak situation, right? But what was even more interesting than losing hope, because that's kind of a given, is that the people that held on to hope, at least for the short term, right? They would say that, or at least Viktor Frankl would say in his writing that a lot of people would die around Christmas time because they thought that was the time that they were going to get saved somehow, some way, or they were going to be let go. And you kind of hear a similar thing through James Stockdale. It's like the people that were a little bit more hopeful about getting out actually fared worse. And so hence you get this concept of the Stockdale Paradox. And so for him, it was like, in his mind, I'm probably not going to be getting out anytime soon, but if I just hold on for long enough, then maybe I have a chance, right? But if I am too naive or too optimistic about what could happen tomorrow, what could happen in the next few months, then I could have too high of expectations of what could happen in the near term, at least, right? And that could end up actually hurting me even more. So why think about this, right? So again, James Stockdale makes it out, tells his story, and it gets put into this book called Good to Great. I think they make a movie of this story too. And also, I guess one more interesting piece to mention here, I think I read somewhere that James Stockdale was actually quite familiar with philosophy and Stoicism and the concept of just being mentally strong and having ideas to pull from. So I don't remember where I got this from, but I remember reading this somewhere. It was probably in a book format. But they were discussing how James Stockdale was actually well read and in this time. He was able to pull from the different readings that he got. So, kind of a plug to read widely, to read from a lot of different people and, just grasp ideas of all kinds. But anywho, why has this thing been interesting to me? Why did it catch my eye? Again, I came across it through Stoicism, actually, and I've mentioned Stoicism a little bit before on here. And for just real quick, it's this philosophy that pretty much says things like focus on what you can control, not what you can't control. Focus on your interpretation of situations. Focus on being virtuous despite the randomness and cruel nature that is reality. I think that's a really big part, in addition to control what you can control, is like the Stoics were very real about what life is like. They didn't shy away from that. They confronted the darkness, they confronted evil and the suffering that can happen, that does happen in life. And so quite interesting connection there. And the reason I've been thinking about it this week is, part of me, there's this feeling that I get sometimes, and I imagine people can relate, but it's essentially, it's hard to hold on to hope about the long-term situation. It's what I've been thinking a lot is like it's easy to be a cynic, pretty much. Now, you know what, I'm curious. I was going to try to define it on my own. Well, you know what, I'm going to define it on my own first. A cynic, to me, the first thing that comes to mind is somebody that's kind of like a complainer, that just looks at a situation and will point out all the flaws and point out all the reasons why something won't work. Now, they might be true, they might be valid, those might be appropriate statements to make, but obviously with like most things, you can kind of go too far with it or be in that mental space too much, right? So much so that you kind of let go of optimism and don't even think about it. But yeah, let me read this definition because I'm curious. So a cynic is a person who believes that people are motivated purely by self-interest rather than acting for honorable or unselfish reasons. Okay, yeah, pretty much. Okay. Well, that's interesting. So here's the Wikipedia. Cynicism, they say it's looking at it as a philosophy that came from ancient Greek, it says, for the cynics, the purpose of life is to live in virtue in agreement with nature. As reasoning creatures, people can gain happiness by rigorous training and by living in a way that is natural for themselves, rejecting all conventional desires for wealth, power, fame. Okay. It's really interesting. So it's different than what I considered cynicism to be. I'm just going to give this one more. Okay, that's interesting. Because when I type it into Google, okay, it does, the contemporary idea of it is that it's an attitude characterized by a general distrust of the motives of others. A cynic may have a general lack of faith or hope in people motivated by ambition, desire, greed, gratification, materialism, goals, and opinions that a cynic perceives as vain, unobtainable, or ultimately meaningless. Okay. So kind of related, I guess, in my mind, how I think about it, right? So you have that distrust piece, and I imagine you could extend that to like a lack of hope, lack of faith for larger society, the world, people in general, the direction of society. So I've been feeling that a lot recently. And two things that really kind of pushed me to think about it. One, it's kind of funny, but it's funny to me at least. After school one day, I was just on Twitter real quick, Just scrolling, interesting, just scrolling, seeing what was up on Twitter. I'm not usually on there, but yeah, just going through Twitter. And I was on it for maybe like 2 or 3 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes at most, right? And I just remember closing the app, putting the phone down, and just being like, what the fuck, man? And pretty much, long story short, so on Twitter, I follow a lot of public figures, let's say. So people from politicians, scientists, famous cultural figures, athletes, political commentators, stuff like that. So it's not really like a fun place to be. It's not like I'm using Twitter for memes or laughs, anything like that, or like sports updates. It's really a lot of like hot topic cultural issues. But anyways, didn't really matter what the details of the content were. It was pretty much like, this is a much larger conversation, as many things are, but it's pretty much a lot of finger pointing, right and left, right? People, prominent figures on the right saying, rah, 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 these darn people on the left, causing more problems. And the same in the other direction, right? Prominent people on the left blaming people on the right for just the disintegration of society and all the woes that we're experiencing today. And it's just more of the same thing, like, oh, those damn Republicans, oh, those damn Democrats. And it just made me sick, man. I don't know how y'all feel about it. I don't know how, well, I guess I could take a guess and, just intuit a little bit. But at least speaking for myself, it really does make me sick to my stomach because, I guess, yeah, since we're here, might as well just dive into it a little bit. I believe that we've been divided for quite some time. It's become harder for people to speak to each other. You could do a deep dive into why that is, right? But I also think that most people, right, whatever you want to call it, I've heard it called the reasonable middle, even though it's funny that the people on the extremes will kind of ridicule you for taking the middle position. They'll say it's like a cop-out, right? But I believe that there is a reasonable middle of people that, for the most part, are good and share a lot of the same viewpoints on life, right? They have a lot of the same views. Of course, they're going to have their disagreements on a whole bunch of things, right? Because we can have an opinion on everything in this world, every situation, every moral and ethical matter, that there's no way that we could align, right? But at least in our society, the context of the United States, and maybe you could even say the West at large, there's a reasonable group of people that agree for the most part, that have the same values, that want the same thing, that want a fair chance, that want people to be able to prosper and live with their individual rights respected and cohesively with other people, and so on, right? At least this is what I think. Maybe I'm naive or foolish for thinking that something like that is possible. But anyways, I was just scrolling through Twitter, seeing a lot of this back and forth from people that I, used to admire to or look to for information and insight. And I mean, you still can, but it's just, in my opinion, it's just not what our culture, society needs at the moment. It's like, stop with the finger pointing. Stop. Just stop. It's not helping our situation, I don't think. And it's frustrating. It's actually quite frustrating. And it turns a lot of people off to politics. It's like, I don't even want to get involved. Don't ask me. Don't bother me. And I feel that. And that's probably what I was feeling too. And that's probably why I brought up this concept of cynicism and the James Stockdale Paradox, or the Stockdale Paradox. It's just like, bro, what the fuck? These people not trying to make the conversation more productive. Like, let's let's work together here. As cliche and cheesy and corny as they may sound, like I really think that's what we need to do. We need to figure out a way to work together, because otherwise, finger pointing, I don't know, man. I don't think we could look through all kinds of examples and find that finger pointing is not the way. So that was one thing. The other thing that really kind of got me just in a mode of thinking, let's say, of lack of hope and a bleak situation, bleak circumstances, is the students at my school and probably students at large. So young people are experiencing an interesting situation, let's say. But for what comes to mind for me, and the reason I've been thinking about it, is just the learning loss, you could say, that has occurred over the past couple years. So we know COVID had a huge impact on a lot of young people's education, whether they missed school or didn't get the same quality of education, or all kinds of other reasons, right? Things that may have come up during this time. And so you got a lot of kids. My kids, I teach 6th grade, and so a decent amount, even in the 7th and 8th, many of them that I know are struggling with the fundamentals of math, let's say, multiplying, dividing, addition, subtraction, orders of operation, being able to write, understand expressions, fractions, percentages. Not necessarily like easy things, but things that they should be able to, kind of keep up to speed with. And it's just been a big struggle for me recently. And also, broadly speaking, like that was specific, but broadly speaking, I'm just trying to figure out a way to get these kids to learn the curriculum, learn the standards, what they're being asked to learn, but also get them to understand the importance, the relevance, and do it in a way that is engaging, right? And trying to keep them engaged, because I'm sure as many parents and adults and teachers and people that work with young people today, we know that even people in general, like everyone's attention span is much shorter. So, as soon as somebody loses interest, it's kind of hard to get them back focused and engaged. But yeah, I guess to summarize that part is I'm just trying to do my best to help these kids learn. And it's been a challenge for all kinds of reasons, the different competencies, the different levels that they're at, their interests, the subject matter, the curriculum. It's been a struggle, to say the least. And so for me, the Stockdale Paradox comes to mind, because it's like, at least the way I see it in my situation, right, it's going to be a challenging school year. One, because it is my first year doing it for real, but two, given everything that I kind of just laid out, it's not going to happen overnight. These kids being able to get up to speed, to learn and understand the things that they're being asked to. It's not going to happen overnight. So that's the part where you be ruthlessly realistic about the short term. That's how I see it. I'm not naive. I try not to get my hopes up too much. We are chipping away at it, though, which kind of leads into the second piece of this, is that it won't happen with me. It may not happen next year, but I tell the kids, at least I tell my students and the students that I come across and know me and I know them, is that I am trying to help prepare you for the future, right? Whether it's high school, whether it's college, hopefully there's something that you take away from being part of my class, from listening to me talk about something that carries you forward in the next phase of life, right? Right now, we're just trying to get through 6th grade, but there will come a time where something you experience in this class or something that you learn, hopefully it helps you moving forward. And so that's kind of how I've been viewing the situation, at least from my classroom, the education piece of this. As far as the political side of things go, that's where, so I do have something to bring up, but before that, there's this concept that comes to mind when it comes to politics, right, and it comes to the world and society in general. I think you could say, I'm sure there's a quote like this, and that's probably where I'm getting this from, but when I was thinking about being a cynic, something that came to mind was along the lines of, the world will give you plenty of reasons to be a cynic, but it takes something special, something different to acknowledge that, but still be optimistic anyways, to be a realistic optimist, right? Because in my view and my understanding, there is plenty of reasons to be a cynic. There is plenty of suffering, tragedy, cruel realities in our world today that we could point to and say, look at that, just how far we've regressed, or how far we've yet to come. Like, we're still just irrational, evil, all kinds of things, right? And the world will give you plenty of reasons. And it's easy to fall into that for whatever reason. You could say it's evolutionary psychology that we focus on the negatives more than the good. You could say that it's culture. We could say that it's what the media is focused on. It's what people focus on. It's the virality of things these days. Whatever the case is, I think it's something worth considering. It's something we should try to push back against a little bit, because that tendency is there. And again, there's no shortage of reasons that we can look to lose faith in the future, to lose faith in the world, to lose faith in the potential for politics, right? I think politics is just, for most people, is probably a big turnoff, negative connotation. But yeah, I mean, for me personally, I think it's the only way, right? If we can't figure something out, if we can't figure out a way to work together, then I don't know. What is it worth to fight for the future, or what is it worth to plan for the future, right? I think that we have to strive nonetheless, no matter how divided we get, no matter how sick and disgusted and turned off we are by the other side, or somebody that completely disagrees with us, whatever the case. I think it's still worth trying. And even for me personally, it's quite frustrating. It does. Like I mentioned when I got on Twitter that one day, and it's something I've been thinking about for a long time, so it wasn't just out of nowhere. Like, I know that we are divided. I know that I'm actually going to pause real quick. And we're back. So my friend called me, wanted to chat with him real quick. But anyways, talking about politics, talking about trying to keep hope for the future, talking about the Stockdale Paradox. This will probably be a quick one because I do have to go soon, but it was all I had to talk about anyways. There's this book called The White Pill, A Tale of Good and Evil, and it actually just came out this past December, written by this guy named Michael Malice. And he has a lot of interesting books, actually, that I think are worth checking out. So he has this book called the Anarchist Handbook. He has a book called Dear Reader, The Unauthorized Autobiography of Kim Jong-il. Yeah, really interesting dude, really interesting political commentator. But the book, The White Pill, is essentially a historical account, let's say, of the Soviet Union. So if people aren't familiar, around 1916, 1917, something like that, late 1910s, Russia underwent a revolution where this group called the Bolsheviks took over the Tsar, and pretty much based on a kind of like using Karl Marx's The Communist Manifesto and the concept of communism as like an underlying foundation, fundamentals, tried to institute a society where everything was equal, the government would control everything and distribute everything appropriately, equally, fairly. And I think it's pretty clear once you dive into the history of the situation and actually look at what happened during the Soviet Union, you find that this was not the case at all. In fact, it was actually whatever you want to call it, totalitarian society, dictator, authoritarian. I think you could use all those words to describe it. And so Michael Malice offers a historical account, but his main message, I guess you could say, I haven't read the book, so this is just my conception of the book based on the interviews that he's done for it. His key message for people today and for people even from that situation is to, no matter how bleak your situation is, somehow, some way, the good will prevail in the end. We may not be around to see it. It may take a while. It may come, out of nowhere. And I think that's, from what I've heard, it's like nobody expected the Berlin Wall to fall when it did. So it kind of caught people by surprise. So Michael Malice's suggestion for all of us is to have hope that somehow, some way, the good will prevail. And it's related to the Stockdale Paradox, right? It's, again, this concept that be ruthlessly realistic about the short-term circumstances of your life and whatever suffering and hardships you may have on your plate at the moment. Don't shy away from it, embrace it, but don't lose hope that in the end, somehow, some way, you're going to figure it out. And that's for you as a person. That's how I think about it in my own life. And then I've got, the political views that I do, and just trying to hold on to hope that despite the division, the polarity that we see in our society, that there are enough people out there that do care, that do want to see where we agree and try to build a more productive, more cohesive country, society moving forward. I think they are out there, and I'm doing my best to hold on to that as much as possible. I do want to read this book, The White Pill. I think the Soviet Union is a really interesting historical situation, time period that I've been learning more and more about recently. I think a lot of people should, because it tells a lot about the directions that societies can go. It tells a lot about centralized power. It tells a lot about self-censorship. It tells a lot about, how human beings can treat one another and how ideologies can lead you down very scary paths. All kinds of stuff that you can pull from the Soviet Union to better understand today's world, be a better human, understand history a little bit more. And so, The White Pill by Michael Malice, A Tale of Good and Evil. Something I've been thinking about. Just kind of wanted to put out there and wanted to put these concepts out there. Again, because it's something I've been feeling a lot recently. It's been hard to maintain hope, I guess, is something also worth mentioning. It's been hard, but I really do try to do my best to keep some optimism and not fall deep down this cynicism rabbit hole, because like I said, after I scrolled Twitter for like those couple minutes, I just wanted to be like, curse everybody, fuck everybody, it's easy to fall into those tendencies, and I'm sure that can be explained in a whole bunch of different ways, from religion from Buddhism. So I think people can relate. I think people can understand that. So something worth meditating on. But anyways, that was pretty much it that I wanted to get into, and I think that's a good place to wrap up. I will say, if you made it this far, I'm going to be recording with my first guest tomorrow. Shout out to my friend Derek. Real quick, just some context. He's I think. I'm pretty sure we met in middle school. I'm pretty sure we went to the same middle school, but we really became more friends in high school. So that's kind of like where all my memories of this guy come from. But I do remember us being in classes and together in middle school. So it's going to be exciting to sit down and chat with him. It'll be a lot of me asking questions about him and just trying to get to know who he is and his background and all kinds of stuff about him. And of course, how we overlap. But yeah, man, that'll be my first guest. Super excited to do that, to see what happens, see how it goes. If you made it this far, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. It's Friday. I hope you have a good weekend, and I hope to see you in the next one.